Yo, how's it going? In today's video, I have a not ice shard Sorc for you guys. This is going to be a lightning Sorc, and I've been having a ton of fun with this build. Its ad clear is insane, so I've been having just a blast with it. Now, before we jump into the video, I did just want to mention a couple things. One, sorry in advance for my voice. I'm just getting over being sick, so it's still a little bit gone. And two, a big one, is we now have our own website with two other fellow creators, Abby Hour and Moxie. And this is where we're going to be posting all of our build overviews. So for this build, and I'm going to update it for our previous rogue builds and our druid build, that we're going to have those overviews over on that website. So if you guys go down into the description and you want to check out the full overview, make sure you guys do that. It is very helpful. I can explain a little bit more and things that maybe I didn't get to in the video. Otherwise, it'd be like 30 minutes long. But yeah, definitely check it out, and I'm very excited to be a part of it. It is in its very early stages, so just keep that in mind. We're going to be updating it constantly as time goes on here. But let's go ahead and jump into this lightning Sorc build. So to start off, we're going to go through our skills and then also our enchantments. Now, our main damage sources with this build are going to be Arc Lash as our basic attack, and then also Ball Lightning. And this is going to be on our right click, basically replacing our core skill. And Ball Lightning is a great passive damage source for us. Also, it's going to be creating Crackling Energies, which are going to be important, and you guys are going to see why in a little bit. But basically, you can constantly be casting these out, and they're going to be orbiting around you with one of the aspects that we have. So while you're up close and personal with Arc Lash, you're going to have that constant damage from these, contributing also with our Arc Lash damage, which does very well. So with this build, we're going to try to keep up Unstable Currents, our ultimate, as much as possible. So you guys are going to want to be stacking a lot of cooldown. As you guys can see right now, I'm at about 41 seconds on my cooldown, and we're going to get a much more cooldown on some of our other skills and with our Crackling Energies. But then we're going to complement all of that with Frost Nova, Teleport, and then also Flame Shield. Flame Shield is just great because it just straight up makes you immune for a couple seconds, and also it's going to be a very big damage source for us too. It's going to allow us to deal a ton of extra crit damage with one of our aspects. And then Teleport is just great, and also with our unique chest piece that we're eventually going to be using, this thing is going to be fantastic for grouping enemies. And then also Frost Nova is good for applying vulnerable. This is the basically only way that we can do so. So one of our big combos that we're going to be doing with this build is freezing enemies, immobilizing enemies, and then also stunning enemies with either Arc Lash or Teleport once you get the unique chest piece. And that's going to allow you guys to deal ridiculous amounts of damage. And that's also why we are using Firebolt as one of our enchantments. That way, anybody that we damage is going to start burning, and that's going to allow us to deal a ton of extra free crit damage to them. And then our other one is going to be Lightning Spear, and this way we can pick up a Crackling Energy and have it send out a Lightning Spear, and this way we can get a ton of stuns, and that's greatly going to increase your survivability. Now, quickly running through our skill tree itself, now we are going to be maxing out Arc Lash. Like I said, this is going to be one of our main sources of damage, and then we're going to be grabbing the Glinting Arc Lash node over here so we can get more cooldowns and live in our Unstable Currents more. And then we do need to put 1 point into Firebolt for our enchantment, so we just have to waste 1 point there, sadly. But moving down to our core, the only thing that we're going to be doing is going through Chain Lightning, so we can get, when Chain Lightning critically strikes, it has a 25% chance to form a Crackling Energy. This is going to be huge because with this one, the Enhanced Chain Lightning, we're going to be getting much more crits and more Crackling Energies, so you guys can have constant cooldowns and also mana gain, which we'll get to here in a little bit. And then our defensive skill node is by far our most filled. Now, I do just have 1 point into all three of Flame Shield, Teleport, and Frost Nova. I just have bonus points for my gear. But with the Flame Shield, we're going to be grabbing Shimmering so we can get the healing going. And then on Teleport, Shimmering again so we can get the DR. You guys are going to be spamming this like every 3 seconds, so that's going to be almost always active. And then on Frost Nova, we're going to do Mystical so we can make enemies vulnerable. This is going to be one of our only ways, like I was saying earlier. And then obviously 3 out of 3 into Glass Cannon so we can deal that increased damage. We need as much as we can get. And then moving down to counteract that Glass Cannon, we're going to be grabbing a couple of the nodes over here. So just one in to align the elements so we can get to these other two, which is Mana Shield, so we can get that 15% DR after you spend 100 mana. That's another reason using Ball Lightning all the time is great, so you can have that 15% DR. And then also Protection, so whenever we use that cooldown, so that's anything that requires a cooldown. So our Flame Shields, Teleports, and Frost Novas will all generate a barrier for us for 2 seconds. And then we're going to be grabbing 3 points into the lightning spear tree here, just 1 point into the base, but then grabbing invoked so we can get the enemies are stunned when lightning spear critically strikes. So this is the way that we're going to get a ton of survivability, because the whole groups are just going to be stunned until they're unstoppable. So most things will not be able to attack you. And moving down into our mastery, our big damage source, like I was saying, why we're using Firebolt and also immobilizing with our Flame Shield, is Devouring Blaze. This is one of the strongest, if not the strongest skill in the entire skill tree here for Sorc. We get 60% X increased crit damage to burning enemies. So that's, like I said, just free. And then why we're immobilizing is because that bonus gets increased to 150% once you guys are at 6 out of 3. Obviously have this if you don't have the amulet yet with 3 into that. So we'll get to that in a little bit. And then Ball Lightning, we're going to max out at 5 out of 5, and then grab Wizard's Ball Lightning so we can form Crackling Energies and have more sustain on our Ball Lightnings. Then 1 point into Static Discharge so we can get Invigorating Conduit and get the mana when we pick up those Crackling Energies. Then down into our ultimate skills, we're going to be looking at Unstable Currents, maxing that out to Supreme Unstable Currents. So when this is active, our Crackling Energy will continuously pulse and it will not consume energy charges. So that's great for us. And also our attack speed is going to go way up when this is active. So that's just overall big DPS increase. And then Coursing Currents here, so we can get that increased chance to critically strike. And then also enemies are going to be dealing much less damage to you after you critically strike them with a shock skill. So that's going to be all the time. Very helpful. And then finally, our key passive is going to be Overflowing Energy. So this is why we're creating so many Crackling Energies. This way we can get a ton of cooldown on our Unstable Currents. And this starts the moment you activate it. So you can be in Unstable Currents and have those Crackling Energies be reducing the cooldown of your next one. So that's very helpful, and why the Supreme Unstable Currents is very helpful on top of that, because you're not going to be consuming any and you're always going to have them pulsing out. Now let's look at our aspects, and then we're going to go back through after we look at the aspects, and then I can tell you a little bit more about the gear and the passives that I'm using. So on our helmet right now, I have taking direct damage has a % chance to reset the cooldown of one of our defensive skills. This happens way more than you'd think it would at a 5% chance. So it is very helpful for just spamming all of those flame shields, frost novas, and all that good stuff. And then on the chest piece, I am using the raiment right now. This is great for grouping the enemies. If you don't have this yet, the build still works out fantastic. I literally just got this. So if you don't have that, you can just throw on another defensive aspect here, like basic skills, grant damage reduction. And then on my gloves at the moment, I have the increased crowd control duration, and then you deal increased damage to unstoppable enemies. You're going to make enemies unstoppable a lot with this build, so having that increased damage to them is very helpful, because pretty much all of our damage comes from them being stunned in some way. And then on my legs, I'm running the increased armor stacking. This is going to stack up so fast because you're hitting everything. This is going to go to 100 very, very quickly. On my boots, this is where our flame shield is going to immobilize enemies when we walk through them. So you're going to want to get very up close and personal. So with the raiment, I'll often teleport in and then immediately pop my flame shield, and all the enemies that got pulled in are going to be immobilized and you can just nuke them. On my main weapon, I run the distant enemies have a chance to be stunned, but the big deal here is you just deal increased damage to stunned enemies. We do a ton of stuns, so this is a big damage boost for us. Our biggest damage boost is going to go on our amulet, and that is the aspect of control, where you deal increased damage to immobilized, stunned, or frozen enemies, and that is multiplicative with itself. So you get that 45%, at least in my case with my roll, to immobilize, stunned, and frozen. So if they're all three, you get 45%, 45%, 45%. It is really, really good. You guys are going to see your damage skyrocket when they're all three. If you knock down a boss, they're going to count as all three. So your damage on bosses is going to go way up once you knock them down. On one of our rings, in critical strikes with core skills increases your attack speed. Once our unstable currents is out, we're going to get that increased attack speed once the chain lightnings are going. And then on our other one, when our unstable currents is not active, we have a chance to trigger a free cast from it. You guys are going to be attacking a lot, so you can get like extra lightning spears and stuff going. And then finally, ball lightning orbits around you, but its damage is decreased. But having that orbit around you is great. It's, like I said, a ton of free extra passive damage, and it's all around you. So when you guys are going to the middle of hordes, you're going to be damaging pretty much everything. Big passives you're going to want to be looking for are cooldown reduction and max life. on the pieces it can. The cooldown is huge when we can just live in our unstable currents. And then otherwise, crit chance is going to be a big one, and attack speed. Our ball lightnings are going to benefit heavily from our increased attack speed. They gain 200% bonus to their tick rates when you have increased attack speed. So the higher that goes, the higher they tick. And then also on our rings, we're going to be looking for max life, crit chance, and then you can get double crit damage. Now, normally I do like vulnerable damage, but we don't really make enemies vulnerable all that often. We're basically reliant on our Frost Nova. So having just a huge stacked crit damage is going to be kind of the way to go for this. I don't have a good roll on my other ring, but this is basically my ideal roll. And then on your focus, you can have your mana cost reduction, so you can spam more of your ball lightnings, also more cooldown. Now, I did want to talk about the amulet specifically here because this is going to make a huge difference in your build. Now, the number one priority on here is going to be 3 ranks of Devouring Blaze. As you guys saw in the skill tree part, that is a ton of extra damage for us. But this amulet can get even crazier. And I'm actually keeping a sacred one right now just because it's the only one that I've found with decent passives along with +3 to Devouring Blaze. But the perfect amulet that I'm personally going to be looking for is 3 to Devouring Blaze. Like I said, top priority. After that, you can get +3 to your defensive skills, which is going to be cooldowns for your teleports and Frost Novas, and also duration on your Flame Shield. So that's big right there. And then you can also get +3 to your mastery. So your ball lightnings can be dealing even more damage. And then finally, cooldown on there so we can have more unstable currents uptime. And that amulet, if you ever get the god roll of it, is just going to send this build through the roof. Well, now that the game just booted me and the time of day changed in game, let's go over my gems real quick. On the armor, we're just going to run rubies to increase our max health. Our barrier is going to be based off our max health, so it's going to be bigger barriers for us. On the jewelry, we're just going to do skulls to increase our armor with our stacking armor aspect. And then on our weapons, we're going to run sapphires, so we deal increased critical strike damage to crowd-controlled enemies. You can run the emeralds as well, but that's not going to be active quite as often just because, like I've been saying, we don't really have great ways of making enemies vulnerable besides our Frost Nova. Finally, looking at my current Paragon board, with the Sorcerer, there's not going to be a ton of legendary nodes that you're going to pick up. It's really going to be about like 2 or 3, and they're not even all that necessary. There's really only one that I highly recommend you get, and that is Static Surge, where you stun close enemies, you restore mana. This is going to allow us to spam more ball lightnings. The big thing you're going to want to pick up in the Paragon tree are your glyphs. Do not skip your glyphs because that's going to be our main way of increasing our damage as time goes on. But really quick, before we get to the glyphs, let's look at the other legendary node that I have, and that is the Ceaseless Conduit. So our Crackling Energies can last a little bit longer and help us deal a little bit of extra damage to trash mobs. And then the only other one that I'm really going to pick up is Icefall. So when we kill the enemies frozen by our Frost Nova, we can get more barrier and that's more survivability. But let's go ahead and take a look at the glyphs that I'm currently running. These are going to change as I level up more and get more spots. It's all kind of depends where they can fit in. The Sorcerer's Paragon board is a little weird with like where you can actually get these secondary effects. But on our first one, I just did Flame Feeder for the increased damage to burning enemies. And then over here, I have Charge. So when we pick up Crackling Energy, we deal increased damage, and also our Crackling Energies are going to deal more damage. And then I'm also running Control, so we deal increased damage to those frozen or stunned enemies. And then finally, right now I have Exploit on just for that little bit extra vulnerable damage. So when we are making enemies vulnerable, it's going to hit much harder. Overall, I've been having a ton of fun with this build. I've actually joined in on a friend of mine who's level 100, and he was running like tier 50 nightmares, and I was actually keeping up. The hard-hitting attacks would kill me, but I was also like level 72 at the time, and there were 30 levels above me, but I was actually able to kill them, which was really cool and very promising for this build. I'm excited to take it a bit further. We will have an update for this build later on once I'm a higher level, maybe around like 90, 95 range. We'll have to see what changes because there's other stuff I want to experiment with, and who knows how it plays out in these higher nightmare tiers. But for now, for levels 50 to 80, this will serve you guys very, very well. But if you did enjoy this build, make sure you leave a thumbs up on it. Also, consider subscribing for more Diablo 4 content. Hopefully you guys check out the website, and like I said, it's on a very early basis, so there's a ton that's going to be changing on that thing, and there's a lot of improvements that we're going to be making, so stay tuned for that. Go down in the description, check it out. This build, I'm going to have the other builds that we've made on there very, very shortly. But anyways, hopefully I'll see you guys over on Twitch because we stream almost every single day. But anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you in the next video. See ya.